The transport ship descended through purple clouds, and Ji-hoon pressed his face against the window like a child seeing snow for the first time. Below him stretched the capital city of the Lara Prime. All silver spires and floating gardens that defied gravity. He had seen pictures during his training, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. The buildings seemed to breathe, their surfaces shifting with bioluminescent patterns that he would later learn were a form of communication. First human to set foot on Vrine's soil, he whispered to himself. The weight of it settled on his shoulders like a heavy coat. Back on Earth, people were watching. Millions of them. Maybe billions. All hoping he wouldn't mess this up. Humanity had fought so hard to get here, to prove they deserved a seat at the galactic table, and they had chosen him. A kid who grew up in the ruins of Seoul during the resource wars, who learned to speak 4 languages by trading scrap metal. The landing pad was huge, big enough to hold 10 ships like his. A crowd had gathered, though they kept their distance. Ji-hoon could see them clearly now, the Vrin people. They were taller than humans, their skin ranging from pale blue to deep violet. Each one had glowing marks on their faces and arms, patterns that pulsed gently like heartbeats, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The door opened, and Ji-hoon stepped out. The air was thicker than Earth's, sweet, like honey and flowers. He took a deep breath, adjusted his formal jacket, and walked down the ramp. His legs wanted to shake, but he forced them to be steady. Cameras were recording this moment. History was recording this moment. A group of officials waited at the bottom. Most wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid light. But Ji-hoon's attention locked onto 2 figures standing slightly apart from the others. 2 women, clearly sisters by the similarity of their features, but as different as fire and ice. The taller one stood like a soldier, her back straight and her silver-blue marks glowing with cold intensity. Her eyes studied him the way a scientist might study an interesting specimen. She wore a military uniform, all sharp angles and dark metal. Everything about her screamed power and control. The other sister was shorter, softer somehow. Her violet marks pulsed with warmth, and when their eyes met, she smiled. A real smile. Not the polite ones the other officials were giving him. She wore flowing robes covered in strange symbols that Ji-hoon would later learn were scientific formulas. Ambassador Ji-hoon, the military woman said, her voice cool and formal. I am Lyrith, commander of the Imperial Fleet. This is my sister, Valera, chief xenobiologist and cultural liaison. Welcome to the Lara Prime. Ji-hoon bowed, the way he had practiced 1,000 times. The honor is mine, Commander. Thank you for accepting Earth's request for diplomatic relations. We shall see if it proves honorable, Lyrith replied. Several officials behind her shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't seem to care. Your species is young, impulsive. You have mastered faster than light travel in just 200 years. A feat that took most species 10,000. We are curious about this. Acceleration. My sister means to say, Valera cut in smoothly, stepping forward, that we are excited to learn from you, just as we hope you will learn from us. Her voice was warmer, kinder. Please, you must be tired from your journey. Let us show you to your quarters. The first week passed in a blur of meetings and ceremonies. Ji-hoon learned quickly that the Vrin were obsessed with protocol. Everything had rules, procedures, proper forms. They had been building their civilization for 50,000 years, and it showed. They moved through their days with the confidence of people who knew exactly where they belonged in the universe. Ji-hoon spent his mornings with Lyrith, discussing military cooperation. She was brilliant, no question about that. Her strategies were flawless, based on thousands of years of warfare experience. But they were also rigid, predictable. When Ji-hoon suggested alternative approaches, guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare, adaptive command structures, she looked at him like he had suggested they fight with sticks and stones. Your methods are chaotic, she told him one morning, her marks flickering with what he was learning meant disapproval. War is about order, precision, perfect execution of perfect plans. War is about survival, Ji-hoon countered. And humans are very good at surviving. Something flickered in her eyes then. Not anger. Interest, maybe? It was gone too fast to tell. His afternoons belonged to Valera. She wanted to understand everything about humans, their biology, their psychology, their art, their dreams. She asked questions that most Vryn would consider beneath them. Why did humans create music? What purpose did crying serve? How could they find joy knowing they would die in less than a century? We make meaning because we have to, Jihoon explained one afternoon. They sat in her laboratory, surrounded by specimens from 100 worlds. We don't have thousands of years to figure things out, so we squeeze everything we can into the time we have. Valera was quiet for a long moment, her marks pulsing slowly. That sounds exhausting. It is, Jihoon admitted, but it's also beautiful. She looked at him then, really looked at him. And Jihoon felt something shift in the air between them. Something unspoken, but undeniable. The assassination attempt came on his 10th day. Jihoon was walking through one of the public gardens, escorted by guards but trying to appear relaxed. Some Vryn had started approaching him, asking questions, and he wanted to encourage that. Then the explosion ripped through the eastern pathway, and suddenly people were screaming. His guards moved to shield him, but Jihoon was already running toward the blast. Training from the resource wars kicked in check for secondary devices. Look for trapped victims. Assess structural damage. 3 Vryn civilians were pinned under fallen debris. His guards were shouting at him to stay back, but he ignored them. Humans were smaller than Vryn, more flexible. He squeezed into gaps they couldn't fit through. "I've got you," he told a young Vryn male, probably just a teenager. The boy's leg was crushed, his marks flickering wildly with pain and fear. Jihoon used his belt as a tourniquet, talking the whole time, keeping the boy conscious. "Stay with me. What's your name?" "Good. Focus on my voice." He got all 3 out before the structure collapsed completely. When the security team finally pulled him away, Lirith was there. She had responded to the emergency personally, commanding the response with cold efficiency. But when she looked at Jihoon, covered in dust and purple Vryn blood, something cracked in her perfect composure. "You could have died," she said. "So could they," Jihoon replied, gesturing to the injured civilians. "They are not the human ambassador. They are not essential to..." "They're people," Jihoon interrupted. "That makes them essential." Lirith stared at him. Around them, the chaos of emergency response continued. But between the two of them, there was perfect silence. Her marks shifted through colors he hadn't seen before. "You are not what I expected," she finally said. Valera arrived moments later, pushing through the crowd with medical equipment. When she saw Jihoon was safe, her whole body seemed to sag with relief. She checked him over with trembling hands, her marks blazing bright violet. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk yourself for strangers?" Jihoon thought about how to explain it in a way she would understand. "Because I'm human," he said simply. "And that's what we do." That night, in the royal palace, 2 sisters stood in their private chambers and said nothing. They had always shared everything. Thoughts, dreams, duties, but now, for the first time in their long lives, each carried a secret they couldn't speak aloud. They were both thinking about the same man. The same impossible, reckless, beautiful human who had run toward danger instead of away from it. Who saw people instead of protocol. Who burned so bright, he might set their entire ordered world on fire, and neither could find the words to say it. 6 months changed everything, though nobody would admit it out loud. The military exercises had become the highlight of Jihoon's week, which was strange because he wasn't really a soldier. Sure, he had survived the resource wars, but that had been about scraping by, not actual combat training. Still, Lirith insisted he participate in the joint training simulations between human and Vryn forces. "You need to understand how we think," she had said, in that tone that made it clear it wasn't a suggestion. The simulation room was massive, using hard-light technology to create entire battlefields. Today, they were running through a standard defense scenario, protect a convoy moving through hostile territory. Jihoon commanded the human squad, while Lirith led the Vryn forces. On paper, it should have been easy. The Vryn had better weapons, better shields, better everything. Then the simulation threw them a curveball. Multiple ambush points, communication jamming, and terrain that made their heavy vehicles useless. The Vryn forces moved exactly as their doctrine demanded: tight formations, coordinated fire, defensive positions. They were magnificent to watch, like a deadly dance perfected over centuries. They were also losing. "Commander," Ji-hoon called out. "Request permission to break formation." Lyraith's voice came back sharp. "Denied. Maintain defensive posture. We hold until we're all dead," Ji-hoon finished. "With respect, Commander, that's not how humans fight." He didn't wait for permission this time. His squad scattered, abandoning their vehicles, using the terrain instead of fighting against it. They became ghosts, hitting fast and disappearing. It wasn't pretty or coordinated. It was messy and desperate, and completely unpredictable. It worked. The simulation ended with both forces intact and the convoy safe. Dead silence filled the room. Every Vryn officer was staring at the tactical display like it had personally offended them. Their perfect strategy had failed. The humans' chaotic improvisation had saved them. Lyraith stood frozen, her marks cycling through colors rapidly, something Ji-hoon had learned meant deep thought or strong emotion. Finally, she looked at him. "Run it again." Exactly the same scenario. They ran it 5 more times. Each time, Ji-hoon's squad adapted differently. No 2 solutions were alike. By the end, half the Vryn officers were arguing loudly about doctrine, while the other half were furiously taking notes. That evening, Lyraith showed up at Ji-hoon's quarters unannounced. He opened the door to find her standing there, still in her uniform, looking uncertain, an expression he'd never seen on her face before. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. She entered slowly, taking in his space. He had decorated it with things from Earth photos, a plant someone had sent him, a guitar he barely knew how to play. It must have looked primitive compared to Vryn apartments. "I wanted to apologize," she said. The words clearly difficult for her. "I dismissed your suggestions. I thought human tactics were inferior. Because they were unrefined." "And now?" Ji-hoon asked, pouring her a cup of tea. It was earth tea, probably too bitter for Vryn tastes, but she took it anyway. "Now I think perhaps we have forgotten something important." She sat down, her posture still perfect but somehow less rigid. "We have had peace for so long. We have turned war into mathematics. Clean, predictable. But real war isn't clean, is it?" "No," Ji-hoon agreed, sitting across from her. "It's not." They talked for hours that night. About war, yes. But also about other things. She asked him about Earth, and he told her about Seoul before the wars, about his family, about the first time he saw the ocean. She told him about her childhood, about the weight of being the eldest princess, about how every decision she made affected millions of lives. At one point, she rolled up her sleeve to show him a scar cutting through her bioluminescent marks. "Training accident when I was young," she explained. "I was trying to prove I was stronger than everyone else." Foolish. Without thinking, Ji-hoon reached out and traced the scar gently. "Not foolish. Brave. There's a difference." She went very still under his touch, her marks flaring bright silver blue. When their eyes met, something hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken. Then she pulled away, stood up abruptly. "I should go. Thank you for the tea. And the conversation." She was gone before he could respond, leaving him confused and oddly disappointed. His afternoons with Valera had become something different too, though in a subtler way. They were supposed to be working on a cultural exchange project translating human literature into Vryn languages. But somehow, they kept getting distracted, talking about bigger things. Philosophy, art, the nature of consciousness. "I don't understand human poetry," Valera admitted one day, holding up a printed book of verse Ji-hoon had brought from Earth. "You have so little time, and you spend it arranging words in patterns? What purpose does it serve?" "It makes us feel less alone," Ji-hoon said. "When you read something and think, yes, Someone else has felt this exact thing. That's powerful. That's connection. She was quiet for a while, reading. Then she looked up, her violet marks pulsing gently. Read one to me. In your language. Jihoon flipped through the book and found an old poem about longing, about loving something you can't hold on to. He read it in Korean, letting the words flow naturally. He wasn't sure she understood the language. But that wasn't the point. When he finished, she was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Again, she whispered, please. So he did. They fell into a routine. Late evenings in her laboratory, surrounded by alien plants and strange instruments, while Jihoon read poetry, and Valera listened like each word was precious. Sometimes she would ask him to explain. Sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence. One night, she confessed something. We Vrin live for 500 years or more. We have time for everything. But I have started to feel like I'm running out of time. Since you arrived. Is that strange? No, Jihoon said softly. That's called being alive. Really alive. She moved closer to him then. Close enough that he could see the tiny patterns within her marks, like constellations. You have changed something in me. I don't know what to call it. What do you want to call it? He asked. She opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. Her marks dimmed suddenly. I should go. My sister will wonder where I am. She left quickly, and Jihoon was alone again, feeling like something important had just slipped through his fingers. He wasn't stupid. He knew what was happening. Both sisters were spending more time with him, finding excuses to be near him. And he was drawn to both of them in different ways. Lirith challenged him, pushed him to think differently, made him want to be better. Valera understood him, saw past his role as ambassador to the person underneath, made him feel seen. It was impossible. It was wrong. It was going to hurt everyone involved. The diplomatic situation was growing more complicated too. More Vrine were accepting humans now. But there was also growing resistance. Some saw humanity's rapid advancement as a threat. Others believed the alliance would dilute Vrin purity. Tensions were building. Then the news came. The Krell swarm had attacked 3 neutral colonies at the edge of known space. Thousands dead. 3 more systems in their path. And according to long-range scans, both Vrin and human territories were directly in their projected route. The Vreen Emperor called an emergency council. Jihoon was invited, along with Lirath and Valera. The room was full of generals and admirals, all arguing about the proper response. They debated protocol, discussed historical precedents, analyzed data. We don't have time for this, Jihoon finally said, standing up. The room went silent. The Krell don't care about your traditions or your perfect strategies. They care about consuming everything in their path. We need to act now, an old general scoffed. And what would a human suggest? More chaos? I suggest we stop pretending we can do this alone, Jihoon shot back. Humans have raw aggression and adaptability. Vrin have technology and experience. Together, we might stand a chance. Separately, we die. Lirath stood beside him. The ambassador is correct. I recommend forming a joint task force. Experimental command structure. Mix of human tactics and Vrin firepower. And who would lead this force? The Emperor asked. Our doctrine requires clear chain of command. Lirath didn't hesitate. Ambassador Jihoon. Under my supervision, the room erupted. It was unprecedented. Insane. Giving a human command of Vrin forces? But Lirath stood firm, her marks blazing with determination. When the vote came, it passed narrowly. That night, Jihoon found Valera crying in the gardens. What's wrong? He asked, sitting beside her. I discovered something in my research, she said. A weakness in the Krell hive mind, but exploiting it would require someone to go deep into their territory. It would be a suicide mission. She looked at him with tears streaming down her face. And I know you're going to volunteer. Because that's what humans do. You run toward danger. Jihoon took her hands in his. Then I guess it's lucky I'm not going alone. She looked up at him, confused. What do you mean? But before he could answer, Lyrith appeared from the shadows. She had been listening. The three of them stood there in the garden, and the truth hung between them like a star about to collapse. They all knew what was coming. War. Death. Impossible choices. And underneath it all, feelings that couldn't be spoken but couldn't be ignored. The War Council met every day now, sometimes twice a day. The Krell swarm was moving faster than anyone predicted, consuming colonies and leaving nothing but empty husks of worlds behind. The Joint Task Force had won 3 small battles, but everyone knew these were just the edges of the real threat. Jihoon stood at the tactical display, dark circles under his eyes from too many sleepless nights. Around him, officers from both species argued about deployment patterns and resource allocation, but his mind was on Valera's research, spread across his personal tablet. The weakness she had found was real, a specific frequency that could disrupt the Krell hive mind's communication. The problem was delivery. It has to be deployed at the heart of their swarm, Valera explained to the council, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. The central nexus. Anywhere else, and they'll simply adapt around it. That's 3 systems deep into Krell-controlled space, one of the Vryn admirals said flatly. No ship could survive that journey. Even with stealth technology, the odds are impossible. Nothing is impossible, Jihoon said quietly. Just very, very difficult. Lyrith, standing at the head of the table, met his eyes. She knew what he was thinking. He could see it in the way her marks dimmed. Ambassador, Jihoon, a word. Private. They stepped into an adjacent room, leaving the others to continue their debate. The moment the door closed, Lyrith grabbed his shoulders. No, she said firmly. Whatever you're planning, the answer is no. You don't even know what I'm going to say. You're going to volunteer for the mission. You're going to throw yourself at the problem like you always do. Because that's what humans do. You see something that needs fixing, and you break yourself trying to fix it. Her voice cracked slightly. Well, I won't allow it. Jihoon looked at her. Really looked at her. The perfect commander was gone. In her place was someone afraid. Someone who had let her walls down just enough that he could see the person underneath. Lyrith, he said gently. You know we have to try. If we don't, millions die. Billions maybe. Then we find another way. We always find another way. She was still holding his shoulders, and he realized she was shaking. You have made me question everything I believed about strategy, about leadership, about what matters. Don't make me question whether meeting you was worth it. Before he could respond, the door opened. Valera stood there. And from the look on her face, she had heard everything. The 3 of them stood frozen, in a moment that felt like it could shatter the universe. You love him, Valera said to her sister. It wasn't a question. Lyrith didn't let go of Jihoon. Yes, so do I. The silence that followed was absolute. Jihoon felt like he was standing at the center of a storm that hadn't decided which way to break yet. I know, Lyrith said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I've known for months. Every time you looked at him, every time you found an excuse to be near him. I know because I was doing the same thing. Valera's marks flared bright violet, flickering with emotion. We are sisters. We have never let anything come between us. Not in 300 years. And yet here we are. Jihoon found his voice. We shouldn't be talking about this now. There's a war happening. No, Valera said sharply. We talk about it now. Because if you go on that mission, there might not be a later. She turned to Lyrith. Tell me you weren't going to let him go. Tell me you were going to forbid it. Of course I was going to forbid it. I'm his commanding officer. It's my right. But he'll go anyway, won't he? Because that's who he is. Valera looked at Jihoon with eyes that seemed to see straight through him. You've already decided. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. Someone has to go. Better me then. Better you? Valera laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think your life matters less because you're human? Because you'll only live a century instead of 5? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She stepped closer. Did you mean that you don't have people who care about you? That losing you wouldn't tear holes in the universe for some of us? Lyrith released Jihoon and turned away, her marks cycling through colors rapidly. This is impossible. The Vryn bonding, it's biological. Permanent. We can only bond once in our lifetime. When we do, we share lifespans. The shorter-lived partner is extended. The longer-lived is shortened. We meet in the middle. I know the traditions, Valera said softly. Then you know what this means. If either of us bonds with him, the other. Lyrith couldn't finish the sentence. Lives alone for the next 300 years. Yes, I know. Jihoon felt like his brain was short-circuiting. Wait. You're saying if one of you chose me, you'd give up centuries of your life? And the other would be alone, Valera finished. Vryn mate for life. We can only bond once. After that, the very idea of being with anyone else feels wrong. Physically, emotionally, every way that matters. That's insane. I'm not worth. Don't. Lyrith cut him off, turning back to face him. Don't tell us what you're worth. You don't get to decide that. The moment was broken by alarms. Red lights flashed throughout the facility. An officer burst into the room. The Krell have broken through the 3rd defensive line. They'll reach the outer colonies in 48 hours. The council reconvened immediately. The situation was worse than anyone thought. The Krell had adapted to their tactics, learned from each encounter. At this rate, they would overwhelm both human and Vryn defenses within a week. We're out of time, the Emperor said, his ancient face grave. The infiltration mission is our only option. I'm calling for volunteers. Dead silence. Every officer in the room knew it was a death sentence. The Vryn feared death in a way humans didn't when you could live for 5 centuries. The thought of dying young was unbearable. I volunteer, Jihoon said, standing up. Request denied, Lyrith said immediately. You're too valuable as the task force commander. Then I'll go, Valera said, her voice clear and strong. I developed the weapon. I know how to deploy it. And I'm the only xenobiologist who understands the Krell biology well enough to adapt if something goes wrong. Absolutely not, Lyrith snapped. You're a scientist, not a soldier. You wouldn't survive 5 minutes in Krell space. Neither would anyone else in this room, Valera shot back. At least I'd know what I was doing when I got there. I said no. You don't command me, sister. Not in this. The argument escalated quickly, both sisters shouting now in their own language. Jihoon watched them, saw the real issue underneath the tactical debate. They were fighting about the mission, but they were really fighting about him, about who would sacrifice, who would stay, who would live with the consequences. He made his decision in that moment. I'll go with Valera, he announced. We'll both go. Increase the odds of success. Both sisters turned to him. And for the first time in months, they were united. United in their immediate, absolute rejection of his plan. Jihoon, no, Valera said. I forbid it, Lyrith stated. As your commander, I am ordering you to stand down. Jihoon met their eyes, each in turn. Then I guess I'm disobeying a direct order. Court-martial me when I get back. If I get back. He walked out of the room before either of them could stop him. He had 12 hours before the mission launch, 12 hours to prepare. To say goodbye. To accept that he might be throwing away something precious that he'd only just started to understand. That night, he found a message waiting in his quarters. It was from Valera, just 3 words. Don't do this. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. From Lyrith. I will never forgive you if you die. He didn't reply to either. Instead, he spent the night preparing his gear, checking his equipment, and trying not to think about 2 women with glowing marks and eyes that saw him better than he saw himself. At dawn, he made his way to the hangar. The stealth ship was ready, small and fast, designed to slip through Krell detection. Valera was already there, loading her equipment. She didn't look at him when he approached. You should have stayed, she said quietly. So should you. I made this weapon. It's my responsibility. And I'm the one who pushed for this alliance. That makes it mine too. She finally looked at him. You're impossible. You're not the first person to tell me that. They worked in silence, preparing for a journey neither of them expected to survive, and somewhere in the palace, Lyrith stood at her window, watching the sunrise, her marks dim with helpless rage and fear she had never felt before. The ship launched at noon. By the time Lyrith reached the hangar, they were already gone, disappearing into the dark between stars. She stood there for a long moment, then walked slowly back to her chambers. On her desk, she found a note in Valera's handwriting. I'm sorry. I love you. I love him too. Forgive me for choosing. And for the first time in 300 years, the commander of the Imperial fleet fell to her knees and wept. The darkness between stars was absolute. No sun reached this deep into Krell territory. Only the cold light of distant galaxies. The stealth ship moved through space like a ghost, its systems barely running to avoid detection. Inside, Jihoon and Valera had been traveling for 6 days. 6 days in close quarters. 6 days of whispered conversations during rest periods. 6 days of learning each other in ways that felt both intimate and heartbreaking. Because they both knew how this would probably end. Tell me about your childhood, Jihoon said during one of their breaks. They were sitting on the floor of the tiny common area, sharing a meal. The food was Vrin rations, which tasted like flowers and made his stomach feel strange, but he was getting used to it. Valera smiled, her marks pulsing gently in the dim light. Lyrith was always the strong one. The brave one. I was the curious one, always asking questions that nobody wanted to answer. Our parents worried about me. They said I thought too much about things that didn't matter. What kind of things? Like why the sky was purple instead of blue. Like whether flowers felt pain when we picked them. Like whether there was meaning in the universe, or if we just invented it to feel less small. She laughed softly. See? Useless questions. See? Not useless, Jihoon said. Those are the best kind of questions. The ones without easy answers. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of her marks. Is that why you read poetry? Because it asks those questions? Yeah. And because sometimes it answers them. Just a little bit. Enough to keep going. They were quiet for a while. Then Valera asked, Do you love her? My sister? Jihoon thought carefully about his answer. I don't know. Maybe. She makes me want to be better than I am. Smarter. Stronger. When I'm with her, I feel like I could do anything. And with me? He met her eyes. With you, I feel like I don't have to be anything but myself. Like I can stop pretending and just be. Her marks flared bright, then dimmed. That's a kind of love too. I know. So what do we do? When this is over, if we survive, what happens then? I don't know, he admitted. I never thought I'd have to choose between two people who both mean. He stopped, unable to finish. Valera reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cooler than human skin, and the bioluminescent marks on her fingers cast little patterns of light on his. Maybe you won't have to choose. Maybe fate will choose for you. Before he could ask what she meant, the proximity alarms went off. They were approaching the edge of the Krell heart space. The scans showed thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands, all moving in perfect coordination like cells in a single organism. The Nexus was at the center, a massive structure that pulsed with bioelectric energy. That's where we need to deploy the weapon, Valera said, studying the readings. Right at the core of the Nexus. Anything else and they'll compensate. So we need to get past thousands of Krell ships, through multiple layers of defense, to the most protected spot in their entire swarm. Jihoon laughed without humor. Easy. We have the stealth systems. And human luck. I don't think luck is going to be enough this time. They spent the next hour plotting their approach, finding gaps in the patrol patterns, calculating acceleration burns that would let them slip through undetected. It was delicate work, like threading a needle in the dark. One mistake, and they'd be swarmed. They almost made it. They were 3/4 of the way to the Nexus when a debris field forced them to change course. The movement must have registered on some sensor, because suddenly alerts were lighting up every display. Krell ships were converging on their position. "They see us," Valera said, her voice tight, engaging evasive maneuvers. The next 20 minutes were pure chaos. The ship twisted and dove through space, dodging weapons fire that would have vaporized them instantly. Jihoon worked the countermeasures while Valera piloted with a skill he didn't know she had. But even skilled pilots and good countermeasures couldn't beat impossible odds forever. A blast clipped their port side. The ship shuddered, alarms screaming. Half their systems went red. "We're not going to make it," Jihoon said, checking the damage reports. "Life support is failing. Navigation is down. We have maybe 2 hours of air left." Valera's hands flew across the controls, rerouting power, shutting down non-essential systems. When she finally sat back, her face was calm in a way that terrified Jihoon. "There's a way," she said quietly. "One way we both get to the Nexus. One way the mission succeeds. Tell me." She pulled up a display showing the ship's systems. "I can transfer all remaining power to the engines and weapons. Give you enough thrust to reach the Nexus and enough firepower to breach it. You deploy the weapon manually. And what about you? Someone has to stay with the ship. To pilot it. To keep the Krell from destroying you before you reach your target." Her marks were glowing, steady and bright. "I'll draw them away. Give you the opening you need." "No," Jihoon said immediately. "No. We find another way. There is no other way." She stood up and moved to a storage compartment, pulling out an emergency suit and the weapon canister. "You're smaller, faster. You can reach the Nexus core on a personal thruster pack. I'll keep the Krell busy." "Valera." "No. You listen." She turned to face him, and there were tears streaming down her face, glowing faintly in the dim light. "I knew this was a one-way trip the moment I volunteered. I made my peace with it. I didn't. I'm not leaving you." She moved to him, cupped his face in her hands. "Do you know what the Vrin bonding really is? It's not just a ceremony or a biological process. It's a complete sharing, memories, experiences, even genetic information. When two Vrin bond, they become part of each other forever." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm going to give you something. Without your permission, without asking, and I need you to forgive me for it." Before he could respond, she pulled him into a kiss. It started gentle, but deepened quickly, and Jihoon felt something strange happening, a warmth spreading from where they touched, flowing through his entire body. His vision blurred, filled with images that weren't his, a purple sky. A childhood memory of running through gardens with a silver-haired girl, the first time she looked through a microscope and saw the universe was bigger than anyone told her. When she pulled away, he felt different, changed, like something fundamental had shifted in his DNA. "What did you do?" he whispered. "I gave you part of my lifespan, part of my memories, part of me." Her marks were dimming now, fading. "It's illegal. Forbidden. But I don't care. Now you'll live for centuries instead of decades. You'll carry me with you." "No, no, undo it. There has to be a way to reverse. There isn't. And I wouldn't if I could." She was already helping him into the emergency suit, her movements efficient despite the tears. "You'll take care of her, won't you? My sister. She's stronger than she thinks, but she'll need someone. She'll need you. Valera, please, don't do this. Someone has to, Jihoon. Someone always has to make the hard choice." She finished sealing his suit and picked up the weapon canister. "And I choose this. I choose both of you. I choose to give her what I can't have. I choose a short life burning bright over a long life in shadow." She led him to the airlock. The emergency thruster pack was already loaded and ready. Outside, the Krell ships were closing in. "When you get out there, don't look back," she said. "Head straight for the Nexus. I'll make sure they follow me instead of you." "I can't." "Yes, you can. You're human. You survive impossible things." She smiled through her tears. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she's free now. Tell her." Her voice broke. "Tell her I loved you both so much that I couldn't bear to make either of you choose." She pushed him toward the airlock. Ji-hoon grabbed her hand one last time. "Your name will be remembered," he said. "On Earth, on the Lara Prime, everywhere. You'll be a hero." "I don't want to be a hero. I just want you both to live." She pulled free gently. "Now go. Please, let me do this one brave thing." The airlock sealed. Through the small window, Ji-hoon watched her return to the pilot's seat. Her marks were barely glowing now, the energy she had transferred to him draining her rapidly, but she sat straight, hands steady on the controls. The outer door opened, and Ji-hoon was thrust into space. His thrusters activated automatically, sending him toward the Nexus. Behind him, the ship's engines roared to life, burning brighter than they should have been able to. Valera was pushing them beyond their limits, making herself impossible to ignore. The Krell took the bait. Hundreds of ships turned away from Ji-hoon, converging on the bright, obvious target. Valera led them on a chase, dodging and weaving. Buying every second she could, Ji-hoon reached the Nexus. The structure was massive, pulsing with alien energy. He found an access point and manually planted the weapon. His hands shaking inside the suit, the device armed itself, beginning its countdown. He looked back then, even though she had told him not to. He saw the ship surrounded, taking hit after hit. Saw it beginning to come apart, and through the shared memories she had given him, he felt her in those final moments. She wasn't afraid. She was at peace. The ship exploded in a flash of light that outshone the distant stars. The weapon deployed. The frequency it broadcast tore through the Krell Nexus like a blade through silk. The hive-mind connection shattered. Thousands of ships suddenly stopped moving in coordination. They began attacking each other, confused, disconnected. Ji-hoon's emergency beacon activated, and somewhere far away, the joint task force would be receiving his signal. They would come. They would win the battle. The war would be saved, but all Ji-hoon could do was float in the dark, watching the debris of Valera's ship scatter across space like ashes, and scream into his helmet where no one could hear him. 3 months after the battle, Ji-hoon still couldn't sleep through the night. He would wake up gasping, his room on the Lara Prime feeling too small and too empty. Sometimes he woke from dreams that weren't his memories of a purple sky, of a silver-haired child laughing, of looking through a microscope and seeing beauty in things too small to touch. Valera's memories, living in his DNA like ghosts. The war was over. The Krell swarm had collapsed without their hive-mind connection, and the joint forces had cleaned up the remnants. Billions of lives had been saved. Ji-hoon was a hero, they said. Both species wanted to give him medals, titles, honors. He refused them all. Instead, he stayed in his quarters most days, staring at walls, trying to remember how to be a person. The Vryn physicians had examined him extensively. The illegal bonding Valera had performed had worked his aging, had slowed dramatically. His cells had been restructured. He would live for 300 years now, maybe more. 300 years of remembering her sacrifice. 300 years of knowing she had given up everything so he could have time he never asked for. He hadn't seen Lyrith since his return. She had sent messages. Formal at first, then increasingly desperate. He hadn't answered any of them. What could he say? Your sister died because of me. Your sister loved me enough to destroy herself. Your sister thought she was giving you a gift, but all she gave us was grief. The human delegation wanted him to come home to Earth, but he kept postponing. He told himself it was because there was still work to do, diplomatic matters to settle. The truth was, he couldn't face leaving. This planet held the last traces of Valera, her laboratory, her research, the gardens where they had read poetry together. On the 100th day after her death, he finally forced himself to visit her laboratory. It was exactly as she had left its specimens in stasis, notes scattered across workstations, a book of human poetry lying open on her desk. He picked it up, saw the page she had marked. A poem about loving someone enough to let them go. She knew. he whispered to the empty room. She knew what she was going to do even before we left. A voice came from behind him. Of course she knew. My sister always planned ahead. Ji-hoon spun around. Lyraith stood in the doorway, and he barely recognized her. The perfect commander was gone. She looked thinner, her marks dim and flickering. Her uniform was wrinkled, dark circles shadowed her eyes. I'm sorry, Ji-hoon said immediately. I should have answered your messages. I just couldn't face me? Couldn't face what you represent? Lyraith walked into the room slowly. Do you think I don't understand? Every time I look at you, I see her choice. I see that she thought you and I together were worth more than her life. It wasn't like that, wasn't it? Lyraith picked up one of Valera's research pads, her fingers trembling. I've been reading her private logs. She documented everything. Her feelings for you, her observations about my feelings for you, her calculations about how to give us both what we needed. Lyraith, she did the math, Ji-hoon. She calculated how much lifespan she could transfer to you, how much time it would give you, how old you'd be when you died roughly the same age I'll be, if we both live our full spans. Lyraith's voice broke. Roughly, she made sure we'd have the same amount of time, so neither of us would have to watch the other die and live on alone for centuries. That's how much she loved us. Ji-hoon felt his knees go weak. He hadn't done the math. Hadn't wanted to think about it that clearly. But of course Valera had. She was a scientist. She had planned everything. I can't, he whispered. I can't be what she wanted us to be. Every time I look at you, I'll remember that she's dead. That we lived because she didn't. Lyraith set down the research pad and moved closer to him. Do you think I don't feel the same? Do you think I don't wake up every morning and wish I could trade places with her? But we can't. She's gone, and we're here. And we have to decide if her sacrifice meant something, or if we're going to waste it by drowning in guilt. How? Ji-hoon demanded. How do we move past this? I don't know. But we do it together, or not at all. She reached out and touched his face gently. I've been angry at you. At her. At the universe. I've been so angry I could barely breathe, but underneath the anger is just emptiness. And I'm tired of being empty. Ji-hoon closed his eyes. Through Valera's memories, he could feel what she had felt for her sister love. Deeper than oceans. Protective and fierce and unconditional. He could feel what she had wanted for them, both happiness, connection, a chance to live instead of just surviving. She left me her memories, he said quietly. I can feel how much she loved you. How much she worried about you. She thought you carried too much responsibility. That you had forgotten how to live for yourself. She was right. She was always right about me. Lyraith's marks flickered with colors. Ji-hoon had learned meant pain and longing. I don't know how to do this. Be with someone. Let myself be vulnerable. She was the soft one. The kind one. You're the one who stood by me in that council meeting. Who defied centuries of tradition because you believed in something new. Who tried to forbid a suicide mission because you couldn't bear to lose someone you cared about. Ji-hoon opened his eyes and looked at her. You're not as hard as you think you are. They stood there in Valera's laboratory, two broken people trying to figure out if broken pieces could fit together into something whole. I can't promise I won't resent you sometimes, Lyraith admitted. Can't promise I won't look at you and wish it had been different. I can't promise I won't wake up crying, Ji-hoon said. Can't promise I won't carry guilt for the rest of my very long life. But we could try? To honor her by actually living? We could try. It wasn't a romance. Not yet. Maybe it never would be. Not in the traditional sense. But Lyraith started visiting him regularly. They would sit in silence sometimes, just being in the same room. Other times they would talk about Valera, sharing memories, laughing at stories, crying together. Ji-hoon showed Lyraith the genetic memories he had inherited. Through him, she could experience her sister's perspective on moments they had shared. It was painful and beautiful at the same time. She thought I was brave, Lyraith said one evening. tears streaming down her face as she watched a memory of young Valera looking up at her older sister with pure admiration. I never knew she saw me that way. I can too through place. She thought you were brave and foolish and perfect, Jihoon said softly. Just like you thought she was brilliant and reckless and too kind for her own good. Slowly, painfully, they built something between them. Not the grand romance that Valera might have wanted, but something real. They learned each other's broken edges. They learned to carry grief together instead of alone. The Vryn Emperor wanted to hold a memorial service for Valera, a state funeral befitting a princess who saved billions. Lirith helped plan it. But she asked Jihoon for one thing. Speak at the service, in her voice. Show them who she really was. So, Jihoon stood before thousands of Vryn and humans, and he shared Valera's memories. He showed them her curiosity, her kindness, her fascination with the small, beautiful things in the universe. He read poetry in Korean, the way he had for her, and translated what it meant. He told them that she hadn't died out of duty or honor, she had died out of love, which was braver than any soldier's death. When he finished, even the most rigid Vryn officials were weeping. A year after her death, Jihoon and Lirith made their decision. They would bond. But they would do it in both traditions, Vryn and human. The ceremony was small, private, just close friends and family. Valera's hologram was there, created from her research logs and personal recordings. Not really her, but an echo of her. When they spoke their vows, they spoke them to each other and to her memory. I promise to carry her with me, Jihoon said. To remember that love means sacrifice, but also means choosing to keep living, even when it hurts. I promise to be worthy of what she gave us, Lirith said. To protect what we're building. To remember that duty and love aren't opposites. They're two parts of the same whole. The Vryn bonding completed what Valera had started. Lirith's lifespan shortened, Jihoon's extended further. They met in the middle at around 300 years, exactly as Valera had calculated. After the ceremony, they visited the memorial that had been built in Valera's honor. It wasn't on the Lara Prime. It was on Earth, in the ruins of Old Seoul, where Jihoon had grown up. A beautiful garden with both earth flowers and Vryn plants growing together. Impossible combinations that shouldn't work, but did. She would have loved this, Lirith said, touching a flower that glowed softly in the twilight. She does love it, Jihoon replied. Through me. Her memories. They're not just images. Sometimes I feel what she would feel. And right now, she's happy. Lirith took his hand. Her marks glowed steady now, healthier than they had been in a year. Do you think we're doing right by her? I think we're doing the best we can. I think that's all she ever wanted. They stood together as the sun set, two species united in grief and hope, carrying a third person between them like a bridge. The war was over. The alliance between humans and Vryn was stronger than ever, and somewhere in the space between stars, where Valera had made her final choice, her sacrifice continued to ripple outward, like light from an exploded star. Years would pass. Jihoon and Lirith would build a life together, complicated, sometimes painful, but real. They would have disagreements and reconciliations. They would create programs to promote human-Vryn cooperation, name research grants after Valera, make sure her name and her work lived on. And every night, Jihoon would dream with two sets of memories, his own human experiences of survival and stubbornness, and Valera's Vryn perspective of wonder and sacrifice. In those dreams, he was whole. In those dreams, all three of them were together. Lirith would wake him from these dreams gently, her marks glowing soft in the darkness. Was it her? She would ask. Yes, he would answer. She says we're doing okay. Just okay? She thinks we should laugh more, take more risks, remember that life is short, even when it's 300 years long. Lirith would smile then, the way she rarely smiled for anyone else. She's still bossing us around from beyond death. That sounds like my sister. And they would hold each other in the dark, three souls bound across life and death, proof that love wasn't about choosing one path over another, it was about honoring the path that was chosen for you, and making it mean something. Valera had been wrong about one thing. Fate hadn't allowed only one of them to be with Jihoon. She had chosen for all of them, and in choosing, she had given them not just life, but a reason to live it fully. In the garden memorial on Earth, the hybrid flowers continued to grow, impossible and beautiful. And in the hearts of two people who loved and lost and loved again, a third person lived on not as a ghost or a memory, but as a promise kept, a promise that sacrifice meant something. That love was bigger than one lifetime. That sometimes the greatest act of love was stepping back so others could step forward together, and that was enough. It had to be enough, because it was all they had, and all she had left them. It was enough.